Alabama's Morning News. I'm JT, and joining us now is James Czerniawski, who is the Senior Tech and Innovation Policy Analyst at Americans for Prosperity, and has been following this story about what social media has been doing to kind of clamp down and hide the misinformation concerning COVID and what the White House and Dr. Fauci were up to. And now it looks like there's a lawsuit involved with this. James, welcome and thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so I saw this, and Fauci and the White House now being forced to disclose some of the emails concerning this very instance or instances concerning information or misinformation about, the health advisories and what COVID was doing. So there's a lawsuit involved in all of this as well with Missouri and Louisiana. What's that all about?
Yeah, that's a great question. So basically, this is a lawsuit that was brought by the attorney generals of Louisiana and Missouri that was trying to go and hold the government accountable for basically leveraging these social media companies and forcing them to be an arm of the state to go and push out a preferred viewpoint from the state. Mm-hmm. Now, the problem here is that during COVID, the government has a public health interest to want to make sure that it is doing everything it can to protect people from getting killed from this, horrible disease that COVID is. But the problem is that because of the First Amendment of the Constitution, they cannot restrain the ability of certain speech to get out there. But private companies can do that because the First Amendment does not apply to private companies. So this was the kind of communication that we saw happening between Facebook and Twitter and the United States government. And they had regular meetings going on between the two companies to talk about COVID misinformation, quote unquote. And it's just one of these I think unique lawsuits that opens up an opportunity, I think, to try to redefine some boundaries between the public sector and the government and the private sector.
Absolutely.
Because we don't want to see that happening, really, I think.
There's so much politics at play these days and everything that's happening in our lives. And we know the pushback on Fauci was enormous with his mandates. And you've got to do this, you've got to do that. When all of us were going through this madness here and, science versus our own immune systems and battling this, the vaccines, they're too early. Everybody should take one.
Yeah.
We all know what we went through on all this thing. And it got to the point, you're right, where even the White House, I think, appointed somebody as far as their misinformation director. And to me, that came off as we're going to be in charge of having someone police what's going on with information out there in social media and other news sources that we don't believe should be out there. And they're just calling it misinformation because politically maybe they don't want that out there or don't agree with it and it doesn't go along with their agenda. So they're clamping down on people's First Amendment rights and free speech. And yeah, you're right. I think this lawsuit is something that was probably overdue, but will certainly, hopefully, expose all of this now. And with this new move now to force Fauci and this Biden administration to come clean with some emails regarding all of this, could we have opened Pandora's box of reality and finally some transparency in what was going on?
I think that's the hope of the lawsuit, is to achieve some level of understanding of what exactly the government was doing with respect to its communications with these social media platforms. I don't think there's anything wrong with the government going and reaching out to companies in general and trying to reinforce them with positive and as accurate information as they possibly can. Because again, there is a public health interest that does matter. But, when you're sitting there and emailing them to go and ask them to take down an account that's a parody of Dr. Fauci, that's probably not the same kind of thing that we're talking about here, and the latter should be severely discouraged. And I think that when we're dealing with quote-unquote misinformation, which is really just information that I don't like if we don't necessarily have a clear picture of what the truth is right now. And what we thought was this.
And when you see the government acting like that, James, it puts a lot of skepticism in the American people's eyes. Well, if they're doing that, what else are they doing? How much is Fauci involved as far as making profit off of what he's pushing? Is he involved with stocks and pharmaceuticals? There was all kinds of conspiracy theories out there about what was the underlying push for this. And a lot of people said, well, look, it is a big disease. It's hitting us worldwide. You got to take some of this as good news and that their intent is good for all of us. But when you're dabbling in the political side of the arena and you're hiding things and not disclosing a lot of things you probably should, there goes the trust out the window.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think one of the most important things where we failed across the board during COVID was that it was an opportunity for the government to try to establish trust with the American people. They wanted to give the government trust to know what they were doing, but at every single turn, the government was taking many actions, I think, that would undermine that trust. And when that happens, that's a detriment, because that's undermining the institution. And we need to be able to get back to a spot where we can trust our government institutions to just do what they think is right and not try to manipulate us. I think we need to trust people to make good decisions for themselves and just put out more information out there. The best way to combat misinformation, quote unquote, in my opinion, is to have a lot of information out there, and to just do your job to make sure that we're communicating good and accurate things to people as often and as frequently as humanly possible.
And I take a look at social media just as much as anybody else does, especially in this job, but I also have in the back of my mind, these social media platforms are nothing more than the National Enquirer to me as you see them, as you check out at the grocery store. Take them with a grain of salt.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that everybody can recognize, especially younger folks are really good at recognizing something that looks a little fishy that might actually be legitimate misinformation, a lot better perhaps than some others. But I think that we have to be able to trust people to make those recognitions. And if not, let's go and figure out ways to go and help people do that more effectively. But trying to leverage the power of government to force companies to take on a certain viewpoint, which seems to be some fact pattern that they're trying to develop with this lawsuit here, is probably not the best way of going about that.
Foul ball for
sure. There's a litany of problems there.
Absolutely. Well, James, I appreciate your time this morning. James Czerniawski, who is a senior tech and innovative policy analyst at Americas for Prosperity. Thank you, James. Appreciate you.
Thanks for having me on.